For decades, Canada's U.S. dollar bond sales passed almost entirely through American banks. Institutions like J.P. Morgan, Bank of America, and Citigroup handled these transactions without question, raising billions of dollars for provincial and federal borrowing programs. In early June, however, Ottawa, the capital of Canada, made a deliberate break with that routine, when officials assembled to issue $4 billion in U.S. dollar bonds to finance new clean energy infrastructure in Alberta, a western province known for its vast oil sands and sweeping prairies. They handed the lead role to Barclays, the London-based bank, rather than routing it through Wall Street heavyweights. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, backed by multiple governments across Asia, was named only as a co-lead, its involvement limited to broadening the investor base without steering the transaction itself. Barclays' selection rested on three practical considerations. First, cost savings. The British bank quoted underwriting and advisory fees approximately 20% below what its major American rivals typically charge. On a single transaction of this size, that translated into tens of millions of dollars kept out of fee pockets and instead available to fund more project work or lower net borrowing costs. Second, speed of execution. Barclays guaranteed to complete all documentation, book building, and settlement 2 weeks faster than any U.S. bank would commit to. In sovereign debt markets, where every 24 hours accrues interest expense, shaving off even a few days can reduce financing costs by millions. Third, green bond expertise. Europe's sustainable debt segment has ballooned by more than $10 billion this year alone, and Barclays has built a reputation for structuring bonds with proceeds tied directly to environmental performance metrics. By tapping that expertise, Canada's Finance Ministry could appeal to a fresh pool of environmentally focused investors and tighten the bond's yield by 15 basis points below initial guidance. None of those financial drivers would have carried the decision without its underlying political catalyst. In the summer of last year, the White House imposed a 25% tariff on foreign steel and a 10% duty on aluminum imports. Those levies cut into Canadian export earnings almost immediately. Factories in Vancouver faced higher input costs. Construction firms in Toronto had to pay more for raw materials. When economic growth slowed in key sectors, Ottawa's debt managers began to question their total reliance on banks in a country willing to impose harsh trade measures. In back-to-back sessions on Parliament Hill, finance officials argued that genuine partnership requires more than shared history and market leadership. It requires assurance that financial channels remain open even in times of diplomatic tension. Appointing Barclays sent a clear message. Canada would no longer assume its deepest borrowing links lay exclusively with institutions in Washington, D.C. While Barclays took charge of the syndicate, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank's role was carefully calibrated. Its Asian headquarters helped bring sovereign wealth funds and pension schemes from Singapore, South Korea, and Japan into the order book, diversifying the list of buyers and smoothing secondary market pricing. Places such as Seoul and Tokyo have vast pools of capital seeking reliable dollar assets. Yet the AIB did not call the pricing meetings or set allocation rules. Those critical functions stayed under Barclays' control, underscoring Ottawa's intent to manage the transaction from a single non-U.S. lead rather than fragment authority across multiple quasi-equal partners. News of the deal reached Washington swiftly. In the Oval Office, senior advisors described Canada's move as a pointed rebuke of the America First financial strategy. Treasury officials privately warned that if one trusted neighbor could edge out American underwriters, other sovereign issuers, from Mexico City to Brasilia, might follow suit. The fear was not just of a one-off loss in fees, though each bond run can generate tens of millions in revenue for banks. The larger concern was that repeated diversifications would erode Wall Street's share of the multi-trillion-dollar global bond market, diminishing the dollar's reach and U.S. influence in international finance. At the same time, on Bay Street in Toronto, Ontario's largest city and Canada's financial hub, bond traders monitored overnight foreign exchange swap volumes for subtle signs of shifting sentiment. They noted that fewer dollars were being swapped out after traditional cutoff hours. Instead, small upticks appeared in euro and yen swap rates. Traders explained that institutional investors who previously felt obliged to stick with dollar funding found themselves more comfortable exploring non-U.S. underwriting channels. Though these shifts were incremental at first, experienced market participants pointed out that tiny, persistent changes in where and how dollars are supplied can steadily nudge up borrowing costs for American corporations reliant on short-term dollar liquidity. Over months or years, that can amount to hundreds of millions more in financing expenses for major U.S. firms. Meanwhile, back in the finance ministry in Ottawa, debate was intensifying over how to codify the lessons learned. Some ministers advocated drafting procurement rules that would require every future U.S. dollar bond sale to include at least one non-U.S. lead underwriter. That approach would spread political and operational risk across a broader set of institutions, ensuring that no single geopolitical flashpoint could jeopardize Canada's entire funding pipeline. Others cautioned that such legal mandates could further strain the economic relationship with the United States, which is Canada's largest trading partner and still accounts for more than 75% of Canadian exports. In response, several Republican governors in the United States began drafting their own legislative proposals, mandating that state and municipal bond issues include at least one domestic underwriter. Dubbed Buy American Bonds Acts, these measures aim to channel underwriting fees back to U.S. banks if foreign firms continue to gain ground in close allied markets. If enacted, such laws could direct billions of dollars in municipal debt business toward domestic banks but also risk triggering a protectionist spiral. Financial lawyers warned that reciprocal rules across trading partners can raise costs for issuers on both sides of the border and deter cross-border investment. Faced with these developments, U.S. banks moved quickly to defend their turf. Within days of Canada's announcement, senior executives at JP Morgan and Bank of America sent new fee proposals to Ottawa's debt office, cutting their standard underwriting fee from 0.25% to 0.15%. They also promised accelerated documentation processes, shortening settlement windows to 7 business days. Yet matching Barclays on green bond expertise proved more challenging. American banks moved to hire green finance specialists away from European rivals and explored joint ventures with them to gain comparable credentials. Behind closed doors, discussions took place about training existing teams on sustainability-linked bond structures and about recruiting former European green bond advisors to shore up capabilities overnight. Beyond cost and expertise, the episode highlighted the intricate links between trade policy and capital flows. A tariff meant to protect domestic steelmakers cascaded through multiple layers of the economy, from factory floors to the boardrooms of debt issuers, ultimately reshaping the very channels through which governments fund long-term infrastructure. The lesson for other sovereign borrowers was clear: political actions, even those aimed at non-financial sectors, can instantly alter which banks win your biggest deals. In late June, Canada's Deputy Finance Minister flew to Washington, D.C. to meet her American counterpart. In private sessions at the U.S. Treasury Department, she explained that the decision to diversify underwriters was grounded in prudent risk management rather than intent to slight. She pointed to the limited role of the AIIB, emphasized that Barclays' global reach helped secure more favorable terms, and underscored Canada's ongoing commitment to deep financial integration with the United States. Still, White House staffers prepared briefing papers suggesting that further reductions in trade barriers might hinge on the return of U.S. banks to top underwriting slots, a delicate bargaining chip that could reshape forthcoming trade negotiations. Back in Europe, Barclays quietly celebrated its success, featuring the Canadian deal in its annual report as a case study of how competitive pricing, rapid execution, and sustainability know-how can open doors in markets once dominated by U.S. firms. In Asia, the AIIB used the Canadian transaction as proof of its growing global relevance, inviting other G7 issuers to consider its co-lead model. Italy's Ministry of Economy reached out informally to discuss co-arranging its next green bond sale with an Asian partner. Japan's debt office convened an internal review to weigh the benefits of adding an extra underwriting leg from Beijing or Mumbai, as Canada prepares the next phases of its funding calendar. With provinces such as Manitoba and Quebec nearing U.S. dollar bond issuance, market watchers will look closely to see whether Ottawa sticks with the Barclays-led approach or rotates lead roles among U.S., European, and Asian banks. The forthcoming treaty talks between Ottawa and Washington will likely address both trade concessions and financial cooperation measures. Over time, the real question will be whether Canada reverts to its long-standing partners once tariffs are lifted, or whether diversified syndicates become the new norm. This single $4 billion green bond issue is more than just a flash in the pan. It represents a larger shift in how sovereign borrowers navigate a world of rising geopolitical tensions. When political trust falters, financial strategies evolve. Today's dollar funding may run through new channels. Tomorrow's global capital markets will reflect not only cost and expertise, but also the resilience to withstand political storms. In that environment, no financial relationship, however long-standing, is guaranteed forever. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more insider breakdowns of the biggest financial stories. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.